Hello, students. This lesson is about point of view. Identifying points of view within a text. When we say point of view, what we mean is how reality looks from one person's perspective. Could be their opinion, could be what they think, what they believe. It's what they see in their mind from their perspective. So writers sometimes present two different points of view on an issue. They present a point of view that is commonly held by many people or by a specific group of people, and they present their own or some other opposing point of view. Usually writers then explain why one point of view is preferable. So we're going to look at this example. I'm going to read this paragraph, and then we're going to talk about the individual sentences in this paragraph. It seems to be a reasonable assumption that the healthcare problems in developing nations are very different from those that face developed ones. However, we would be seriously mistaken if we accepted this assumption. In fact, the reality is that healthcare systems throughout the world are facing many of the same general challenges and some of the same specific problems. HIV/AIDS, for example, is a major threat in both developed and developing countries. To begin, let's look at sentence 1. Sentence 1 contains an idea about differences in healthcare problems for developing and developed countries. The word assumption, here's the word assumption, is a view marker, a word that tells readers that the writer considers what comes next to be an opinion, not a fact. Note that some view markers are more neutral than others. For example, belief is neutral, offering no judgment, whereas assumption suggests a mistaken or inaccurate opinion. So when you say that someone is making an assumption, you're implying that they are just thinking this idea without really knowing if that idea is true. And so this first sentence is talking about an assumption that people are making. Sentence 2 begins with however, a contrast marker. So now the writer is going to contrast what they said in the first sentence. It tells readers to expect the writer's disagreement with sentence 1. The word mistaken is an assessment marker, a word the writer uses to judge, here negatively, the view that is expressed in the first sentence. So we have our contrast marker here that says now we're going to contrast this idea with another idea. And the writer says we would be mistaken if we accepted the assumption that is mentioned here. So next is going to be the contrast. So looking at sentence 3, sentence 3 offers a different view of healthcare problems around the world, which is that they are often the same. So if you look at sentence 3, you can see, in fact is saying that here's what's really true. And then the reality is another way of saying here's what's really true. And then this is the new view. This is the opposing view to the first view that was given up here. So this view is that healthcare systems throughout the world are facing many of the same general challenges and some of the same specific problems. So the words in fact and reality emphasize that the writer believes this view. This is what the writer's view is. And then looking at sentence number 4, it contains an example to support the writer's point of view. So sentence number 4 does not change the writer's view, it adds to it and makes the writer's view stronger. When it says HIV/AIDS, for example, is a major threat in both developed and developing countries. So that strengthens what the writer was claiming is the truth. Here are words that writers use to show views, to show a point of view. So we call them view markers. And these words here are verbs, and these are nouns. So the writer could say to assume, which is a verb, or assumption, which is a noun. The writer could say to conclude, which is a verb, or conclusion, which is a noun. Whichever words the writer chooses to use, these words indicate that the writer is talking about a view that someone has, whether it's someone else's view or their own view. Either way, these words show what people think. You should pause the video and read through these words and get to know these words so that you can more easily identify when a writer is talking about a point of view. Other words that are important to know would be contrast markers. So after the writer has given a common view that a lot of people believe, then the writer might contrast that view with a different view that the writer believes is true. And so contrast words like but or however are used quite often to show that the writer is now going to give a different point of view. And then other words that the writer could use while writing are assessment markers. And assessment markers are basically the writer saying whether or not a view is correct, whether or not they agree with a particular view. So they're going to assess the view and talk about what they think of it. These are words that indicate approval, which another word you could say would be agreement, or disapproval, or you could say disagreement of the common view. So if the writer uses the word accuracy, they're talking about whether or not something is correct. If they call something a myth, they're saying it's not true. If they say it's an illusion, they say basically it's just some idea, but it's absolutely not true. These are nouns. And then over here, adjectives, such as inaccurate or incorrect or invalid. These are all words that the writer could use to either say that something's true or not true. If the writer says flawless, that means it has no mistakes. But if the writer says flawed, then that means it does have mistakes. So if you don't know these words, you should push pause on the video and get to know these words a little bit. And that will help you understand when writers are making a judgment about somebody's view. So let's review the strategies here. When you're reading, look for view markers. Use them to establish that you are reading about what the writer considers to be opinions, not facts, and to identify the common view. Look for contrast markers. Use them to identify where the first view ends. Look for assessment markers. Use them to identify the opposing view. And now we're going to look at an example. In this sentence, we're going to identify the view marker and the opinion. At the end of their analysis, the authors conclude that political oppression is increasing in some parts of the world. So to start with, what is the view marker? Which word in here indicates that we're talking about a point of view? Remember that these words here are the view markers. So if you found the word conclude, you were correct. And what was the conclusion or the view that the authors are talking about? It is that political oppression is increasing in some parts of the world. That's the opinion. Okay, let's look at this example. There is a widespread belief that cardiovascular disease is a problem only in affluent societies and that it attacks mostly men. Studies from the 1990s, however, provide evidence that this view of CVD is no longer valid. So in these sentences, let's identify the common view, the contrast marker, and the assessment marker. Push pause on the video and see if you can identify those three things. Here are the answers. Now let's look at another example. In this paragraph, identify the common view, the contrast marker, the assessment marker, and the author's point of view. Push pause and then check your answers. Here are the answers. Now read this example. Push pause on your computer, read this paragraph, and see if you can identify the common view, the contrast marker, the assessment marker, and the author's point of view. How did you do? Here are the answers. Let's look at another example. Go ahead and push pause, read this paragraph, and identify the common view, the contrast marker, the assessment marker, and the author's point of view. And then check your answers. And here are the answers.